Hi, everyone. Welcome to part two um, of our lecture series this week. And part two should be a pretty short video where we're going to talk about this topic of what are the nutrients. So let's just get going. So the nutrients, we refer to them oftentimes as the essential nutrients. And the essential nutrients, well, they're considered essential because they're required for normal body functioning. Um, the body is not able to make these nutrients, at least in quantities that are necessary. So, in general, we have to consume these through the foods and the beverages that we eat. And something that I've always thought is kind of a bummer is there's no one particular food that contains all the nutrients that we actually need. And so, a key point um, is this. It's one of the other things that's very important from a nutritional perspective is that we eat a variety of foods. And a good question I like to pose is just to ask for you to think about this: are you a rut eater? And what I mean by that, do you have a tendency to eat the same foods each day? And I suppose it's going to depend on what those same foods are. But for those of us that maybe are more so rut eaters, there's a real good possibility that we're not actually meeting our nutritional requirements and that we're not actually getting all of the essential nutrients. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the essential nutrients are. And I have them split into two categories here: the fuel nutrients and the regulatory nutrients. Okay, in this class, we spend a lot of time with the fuel nutrients, less time on the regulatory. In fact, with regulatory, it's very, very minimal. Um, just the scope of this class and what we do in here, I like to focus more over here with these fuel ones and let our nutrition class, uh, really more fully explore regulatory nutrients. So fuel nutrients, there are three: carbohydrates, protein, and fats. And we refer to these nutrients as fuel nutrients because they all have caloric value. Okay, regulatory nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and water. Um, no caloric value in this category. So let's go ahead and look a little bit more specifically at some of the basics with the fuel nutrients and how they show up on our nutrition facts labels. So we're going to use the label, at least initially, to begin to identify how many calories are in each of the fuel nutrients. And here is a copy of a label, and this happens to be an older nutrition facts label. And with the older nutrition facts label, it used to be right at the bottom. This information did. And if you look closely, what you'll see is it's saying calories per gram. Fat contains 9 calories per gram, carbohydrates contains 4, and protein contains 4 calories per gram. So, once again, the fuel nutrients, they're considered fuel nutrients because they have caloric value. And if we look a little more closely at this nutrition facts label, which, by the way, you're going to see these on all the foods that you purchase, what we're getting in the nutrition facts label is some information about how many grams of total fat there are, how many grams of total carbohydrates, how many grams of protein. So boom, there are your three fuel nutrients right there. And so knowing that, for example, fat has a value, a caloric value of 9 calories per gram. If I look up here, it says there are 7 grams of fat, and that would be in one serving. Well, 9 times 7, 9 calories times 7 grams, what that basically means is there are approximately 63 calories of fat in one serving. So just some general information there about calories per gram. And if you weren't already aware of it, knowing that those three fuel nutrients appear on the nutrition facts label. Okay, wanted to point out too that we're in a period of transition with nutrition facts labels. You know, if you go to the cupboard and you pull out some of the foods that may be in there, you're going to probably see a combination of labels. Um, this to the left, it says old up here. That's what our nutrition facts labels have looked like in the past. And if you come on over and look on the right, this was actually supposed to take effect in January or January 1, 2020, that we would start seeing the new nutrition facts labels. And, you know, there are some changes. If you look, one thing that's easy to see is just they're bolding certain items to make them more visible. Another thing that has changed, and I think this is a really good change, if you look on down here on the nutrition facts label, you're seeing that it's giving you feedback on how much vitamin D, how much calcium, how much iron, and potassium are in a particular food. If you look back at the old nutrition facts labels, a little different. They're looking at A, vitamin C. The reason for the change down here is related to these are some areas that are problematic. You know, with a typical diet, we tend to not get enough vitamin D, calcium, iron, or potassium. In fact, with the nutrition project that you all are in the process of completing, in a class of, let's just say, 25 to 30 students, I will generally only have one or two students who actually are consuming enough potassium on the days they do the project. I know for me, vitamin D, I supplement it now because after tracking my nutrition for, you know, a month or so, it was very clear I am consistently very low in vitamin D. So, you know, the nutrition facts labels have changed down here with what they're actually highlighting in terms of vitamins and minerals to be looking at. So another change with under carbohydrates, they're now adding this area that identifies how many sugars are considered added sugars. Okay. And what this is showing with this particular food item is that 10 of the 12 grams of sugars are considered to be added. They didn't just naturally occur within the food product itself. They added sugar to this food product. So, you know, with something like fruit, with a fruit, that's all naturally occurring sugar. Um, and, you know, but what you'll start to see on a lot of nutrition facts labels with this new one is you're going to get to really eyeball how much sugar actually got added to that particular food. So this is just a little more information on, you know, what's actually changed. Ranging from font sizes and just increasing the size and bold typing some things, um, the added sugars, the changes in nutrients required. So that breaks it down maybe a bit more clearly. And let's go ahead and look at, I like to check in with you guys to see if you have an understanding of how to actually read a nutrition facts label. And I found that most students do. However, I have found pretty consistently that there are a couple of areas that are misunderstood and are not being interpreted accurately. So when you look at a nutrition facts label, the first thing you really want to check out is this top portion right here, where it's identifying how many servings there are per container. And this can be really, really shocking at times. I use the example of um, a pint of ice cream, for example, a pint of Ben and Jerry's. It depends on which brand pint you buy, Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs, whatever. But a lot of those pints are going to tell you there are 3.5 to 4 servings. And if you don't look at how many servings there are per container and what is considered an actual serving, for example, this says 1/2 cup, well, you might just hop on down and assume one container equals one serving, eat the whole thing, and believe that you only consumed 200 calories. So this is calories per serving. Okay, so if for some reason I decide to eat everything that's in this container, I'm eating 8 servings, which would mean that I'm consuming 200 times 8 or 1600 calories. Okay, so the question's over here, how many calories are in one serving? Well, 200. Okay, question number 2, how many grams of carbohydrates are in one serving? And if you come on down to this fuel nutrient carbohydrates, it says total carbohydrates 17, but underneath it, it's listing 2 other categories here, dietary fiber, 1 gram, sugars, 14. So how many grams of carbohydrates are there in one serving? And this is the piece of information that I sometimes find students aren't interpreting this correctly. Well, this says total carbs or total carbohydrates. There are 17 total carbohydrates in one serving. And this is a breakdown of the carbohydrates. One of those 17 are considered to be dietary fiber. So the label is actually pointing out something important. How much fiber are you getting per serving? And it's also saying that 14 of the 17 grams are actually considered sugars. Now, when we get into the carbohydrate section, we're going to do what I think is some pretty interesting stuff with this carbohydrate portion of the label. But for now, just understand that there are 17 grams of carbohydrates per serving, 1 of the 17 fiber, 14 of the 17 sugars. You do not add up these 3 numbers to determine how many grams are in a serving. Now, this says how much total fat, this is question 3, how much total fat will you consume if you eat 2 servings? So here is where we're seeing total fat. There are 14 grams of fat per serving, and underneath it's showing us that 9 of the 14 are considered to be saturated fat or the bad fat. So if I eat 2 servings, how much total fat? Well, that's going to be 14 times 2, so 28 grams of total fat. So hopefully this helps. If any of you have questions about nutrition facts labels, I would encourage you to go to your kitchen, see what you've got in the cabinets, in your freezer, look at nutrition facts labels, and become a bit more aware of what you're actually consuming in terms of calorie content, in terms of grams of total fat, carbohydrates, proteins. And we'll do more with this later as we get into specifics with each of the fuel nutrients. Okay, so that's it for now, and I will talk with you soon.